So Boker Tov on this fine Sunday morning, special day, as I will explain. And before I begin the class, I want to mention, we don't do this often, maybe once or twice a year, but it is this time of the year. Today we're launching our annual matching gift campaign, today and tomorrow, which is based on kind donors. We have every dollar that's given will be matched. So if you appreciate the work and value the work that Chabad has done and does and will continue to do and expand with God's help in the community on so many levels, and you enjoy this class, so please participate kindly and generously. I will include the link to how I've already posted it in some places, but we will include the link on the bottom of this class, God willing, when done. And please participate and share with others so that all the good work can continue and expand and increase. So thank you for that. Again, every dollar given is doubled. Baruch Hashem. So the title of the class is, should the USA own Gaza or purchase Gaza? Now, I don't even think that the title is clickbait, because those of you who have listened consistently to our discussion that we have, our Torah discussion, know that I do not get involved in political discussion, or at least it's very rare. It's very rare that I get involved in political discussion. What I do is to try to give some insight and learn a lesson maybe from some of the discussion, and based on what the Baal Shem Tov says. The Baal Shem Tov says, famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, that everything that one hears and sees is a lesson in Avodat Hashem, is a lesson in how one should serve our Creator, the Almighty. And in that vein, I want to address this discussion that came up this past week when Bibi Netanyahu visited Washington, and much of the attention given to it, as we find ourselves in a very in a battle for the safety of both Israel and our people everywhere. So first, let's say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh bidvaro. Let's start always as we do with some tzedakah, with a mitzvah of tzedakah. And there we go. Put in a little tzedakah. So, and also as it really relates to the parsha of the week, last week and the week we're coming are the pinnacle of what we've begun from Genesis, from Bereshis until now. All is about leading up to the portion that we've been reading this past week and this coming week, which is the Exodus, the splitting of the sea, the Yam Suf, receiving the Torah, the Ten Commandments this week, and that's what it's all about. So this discussion that we're going to have is in that context. Now, as not to totally ignore the question, I do want to give my opinion, my thoughts, and as I always say, an opinion is just an opinion, but I'm giving this opinion based on what I believe is the proper Torah approach, and based on the guidance, influence, inspiration, teachings of my holy Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the leader of the Chabad movement. So, with regards to whether, I'll get to the first, get sort of that out of the way, and then we'll discuss the parsha. With regards to, this past week, just for some of you who don't follow the news, all you do is follow sports, or you just disengage because of all the negativity that's out there, and my hat's off to you if that's what you do. But this past week, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, spent basically the entire week, in Washington, meeting with the president, meeting with leaders, meeting with people of influence, and in the discussion, President Trump suggested that the USA will buy or will own Gaza. That's the words he used, will own Gaza. And then there's been some clarification of what it means. I mean, you could look up the news. I'm not a news reporter over here. So I want to just address from Israel's standpoint, not so much from the U.S. A's standpoint, because that has been discussed again in news media and talk shows. I'm coming here more from an Israel standpoint, although USA and its well-being is of high importance, and love that I have for this country and those I'm sure who are listening. From Israel's perspective, the idea that the United States own Gaza, in my view, again, based on my understanding of the Torah approach, is not a good idea. It's not a good idea, and I will focus on two things. Two things. One is Israel belongs to the Jewish people. Biblical Israel definitely includes Gaza as well. There is some discussion of whether it is part of Israel today, or it will only be part of Israel when Mashiach comes, and so on. But regardless, Israel, the biblical Israel, includes Gaza. And therefore, it's the land promised to us, and it belongs to us unapologetically. And this idea of others owning Israel is not what we should want and be excited about. That's from a sort of perspective of truth. Now, even from a perspective of practicality, I don't think it's a good idea, and I'll tell you why. U.S. administrations come and go. Some administrations are more pro-Israel, some are less pro-Israel. Depending on what your sort of political views are, you might say this one is more and this one is less. So that's not a discussion I'll get into, but one thing is clear, that U.S. over the last matter of 50 years has placed enormous pressure on Israel on how it should behave. Whether you agree or disagree that the U.S. should be putting so much pressure is also a matter of conversation and discussion. And again, you could have every Jew to every two Jews, there's three opinions, etc., etc. But it is no secret that in the last 50 years, U.S. has often put pressure on Israel, which was not in the best interest of Israel. If the USA would actually own Gaza, it would not, in my view, be in the best interest of Israel in a consistent long-term basis. It might be good one day yes, one day not. Already there's so much pressure being placed on Israel, to the extent that sometimes people view Israel almost as a puppet regime from the United States, and Israel cannot afford that. Not when it comes to its very security and basic existence, as much as we appreciate tremendously the support, the backing, the arms that the United States, that our country provides to Israel. At the same time, there are times where that comes with a lot of strings attached, many strings attached, which is not to the best interest of Israel. So long term, you could, again, within a given administration, say, okay, it's a good idea right now, but long term, I do not think that that's a good idea. That is my opinion. Now, for Israel, for the United States to go in there and clean up Gaza and manage the cleanup and invest in Gaza, that's a whole different discussion, and that is something that might be good, and that needs to be further discussed between the Israel's leadership, the United States leadership, and so on. But in terms of owning a piece of Israel, not a good idea. Okay, let's move on from that discussion, and let's shift over to the Torah discussion, which is what you are all mainly here for. The Baal Shem Tov says, as I mentioned, that everything that we see and hear is a lesson in Avodat Hashem. So, regardless of what you think of this suggestion by the president that the U.S. should own Israel, and whatever it means, whether it means specifically, whether it means literally, or whether he meant more as a negotiating tool, that's all up for discussion. And there are smarter people and what we say mavens who could give you insight into that. But the lesson over here in Avodat Hashem and serving God is a beautiful lesson, and that is the following. The Medrash tells us that when the Jews went into the desert, and then they went through the splitting of the sea, the Medrash tells us that there was many miracles that are not recorded specifically in the written text, but that we have by tradition passed down from one generation to the next, of what happened when the Jews went into the sea as the Exodus occurred and then towards Israel. One of the miracles of the many was that the sea sprout forth within the desert over here, luscious fruit and vegetation that they were able to benefit and enjoy and so on. In other words, the desert and the barren desert and that which was devoid of any growth and any support for life all of a sudden became a Garden of Eden. So here is the lesson. Exodus, as we've spoken so many times, represents not just the physical going from one geographical place to another, but it also is about our psychological exodus. One thing I did like about the suggestion of, Gaza is such a desolate place. It's so full of there's so much destruction and danger and harm and unexploded munitions and so on. And then comes the president and suggests something that is out of the box. It's out of the box in terms of how foreign policy throughout the world has been addressed with regarding to the Middle East and Israel the last 50 years. And that is, let's turn this place, instead of a place of poverty, instead of a place of hate, instead of a place instead of a place of where we launch rockets and in return so many innocent people are killed and so on, let's turn this into a Middle East Riviera. Perhaps that's a pipe dream, perhaps that's not real, perhaps it's a mishigas, but the lesson there is a beautiful lesson. The lesson over there is so associated with the giving of the Torah that we read right now. And I say this also within the context that yesterday was Yud Shvat, the day the Rebbe became leader. And the most famous Maimer Hasidic discourse that Hasidim throughout the world learn on this day is called Basi Legani or Bati Legani. I have come to my garden. That's based on a medrash which says that God refers to this world as my garden, my place of pleasure, my place where I could feel totally at ease and relax, and my presence is felt. Bati Legani. And if we could sort of mark the theme of the Rebbe's approach to everything in life, is that he always saw in the destruction and in the challenges and in the difficult, he didn't see the desert, he didn't see the outer layer, but because Torah, Hasidus, the Rebbe came from a place of holiness and goodness, he always saw the underlying good and potential that was, and our purpose and mission to reveal and bring forth that underlying good is something that he always saw and believed in. We had someone who came here, Rabbi Zirkin, very beautifully, and he spoke about teachers, and he said, today, unfortunately, often teachers are just that. They teach. They walk in like a professor. They walk into a class. My job, what I get paid for, is to give over information, and that's where it starts, that's where it stops. He says, in truth, a teacher is supposed to be an educator. And in his words, he says, not only an educator, has to be an excavator. A teacher has to be there not just to teach information to the child. And if a child is maybe not the smartest, then basically I have no interest in that. And I have my 5 kids who are ready at the listening, and the others I sort of babysit. No, a teacher, an educator, a parent has to be an educator, has to be an excavator. They have to be able to see and bring forth the real, true inner potential of that child. In the desolation, in the destruction, what they need to be able to see and believe in is the garden, the Riviera, that we can bring forth in each of those kindalach in ourselves and in the most sort of more dark situations. That's what we need to do. The splitting of the sea, says Kabbalah, represents exactly that. A sea Mayim covers the entire world that's in there. The splitting of the sea is that all of a sudden we see a whole world that's in there. The giving of the Torah goes hand in hand with the splitting of the sea, but of course in order to do that you have to have a clear guide. You have to have a clear moral guide. Today we see that just left to human morality without a clear moral guide, where it leads to. So the splitting of the sea, the giving of the Torah, tells us that in a place, that's our mission, that's our purpose, in a place of destruction, in a place of what seems so antithetical or so opposite of anything good and holy, and just continuing and moving along as we've done for 50 years, 100 years, or in your own personal life doing the same thing again and again. No, the splitting of the sea, Exodus, the giving of the Torah represents that we see the garden, Bati Legani. People look around and they see the world and they say, well, it's a garden, it's a jungle, it's dangerous. Bati Legani, we have to know and believe, I've come to my garden. I want to share a story. Talking about yesterday was 75 years of the Rebbe's leadership. So I want to share a beautiful story that I've read from one of the people that produce, and a huge thank you to the rabbis who produce a weekly Torah thought in writing, which we could all benefit and then share, spread the light of Torah. So over there he brings a story with the Rebbe. And it was an older chassid, an older gerer chassid. For those who know different Hasidic groups, there's a Hasidic group called the Hasidim of Ger. The Rebbe of Ger is based out of Israel, out of Jerusalem, but there are Ger Hasidim throughout the world. So there was this older chassid of Ger who came to the Pnei Menachem. The Pnei Menachem was the previous Ger Rebbe. And he shared a following personal story that he had with the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He was an older chassid, and he says in the 1940s, he was a young man, and as many young adults, sometimes as their sort of brain is maturing, decide to take their own journey, and he decided to stray from the heritage of his ancestors, and including from the Hasidic Ger customs. They wear this black hat, tilted upwards. They have the big spudik, those big fur hats. They have their own unique traditional garb, long peyot, long side locks. And of course the ways of and customs that are unique to Ger, in addition to the general observance of Torah and mitzvot. And he decided to stray and leave it all behind, and he traveled to Thailand, opened a business there, and was very successful. And his appearance was no different than anyone else on the street, no Jewish Hasidic particular look. And one day he finds himself, this is in the late 40s, he finds himself in New York on a business trip or visiting family, and he's in an elevator. And in the elevator he finds, he has a quick interaction with a Jew who was referred to then as the Ramash. The Ramash was Rabbi Menachem Schneerson. In the late 1940s, he was not the Rebbe of Chabad at that time, his father-in-law was the Rebbe. And they would refer to him as the Ramash, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, known as the son-in-law of the then 6th Chabad Rebbe. And in a couple of moments, there was a little discussion, Shalom Aleichem, one Jew to the next, and he says, where are you from? I'm from Thailand. He says to the future Rebbe, and the Rebbe says to him, you're in Thailand, do you know if there's a mikveh? If there's a mikveh in Thailand, perhaps you should sort of get involved in that. A mikveh, especially for women, is of biblical importance in fulfilling God's commandment with regards to the laws of impurity. They also have spiritual impact on our kindalach and our children, and it's very important for a woman to keep, and a man to keep, the laws of family purity. And that was their 1 minute or 30-second discussion. This Jew is telling the Pnei Menachem, fast forward 40 years. 40 years later, I have made a full circle. I've come back to my roots, moved back to the Ger community, put back on the traditional Ger Hasidim garb, and I find myself on a trip to New York. And this is in the mid to late 80s. And I decide I want to visit the Rebbe. At that time, the Rebbe was Rebbe already. This is 40 years later. And as many of you know, and probably have seen video clips, every Sunday the Rebbe would give out dollars, $1 to a person as a messenger to give to charity. And that was an opportunity, even in those couple of seconds that you interacted with the Rebbe, to get a blessing. So he goes to Crown Heights, and he gets onto line, and he walks by, and people, I mean, I've been several times, quite a number of times, I've had the merit to receive $1. You basically walk by, you're in and out in a moment. You make eye contact with the Rebbe says blessing and success, bracha v'atzlacha, whatever it might be, and you keep on going. That's what it is for most people. Every so often, if somebody wants a blessing, somebody's not well, they ask the Rebbe, please, can I have a blessing for so-and-so? So he walks by and just decides to continue walking. He gets the usual blessing that the Rebbe was giving to everybody, and then the Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe says, what's going on with the mikveh in Thailand? And he says to the Pnei Menachem, it was incredible. 40 years later, I'm not wearing the same levushim, the same garb. So the Pnei Menachem said to him the following. He says, it's not that the Rebbe had a phenomenal memory, which he did. That's not what's at play over here. The Rebbe saw you 40 years. The Rebbe, being a true spiritual giant, a Moshe Rabbeinu, he did not see the outer packaging of 40 years ago. He saw your soul, and he saw the mission and purpose of your soul. Tzaddikim are imbued with that vision. That's why I'm on Shlichut here in Coral Springs, because the Rebbe sent me here. He says the Rebbe saw you then. He saw you. He saw your neshama. He saw your essence. He saw your potential. He saw your mission, and if that's your mission, that's your potential. And that's why he saw you and he recognized you 40 years later. We're not Rebbes. We're not of that lofty soul. But we are imbued with the ability that when we see desolation, when we see a child rebelling, when we see a situation that seems so dark, it is within our mission and purpose. The fact that we have seen it, says the Baal Shem Tov, says that we could split the sea, we could see the garden within. Not only we can, we must. And we must take the actions that it takes, whether it's a child, whether it's a community member, whether it's a community in general. The previous Rebbe said that when a person, a chassid, comes into a community, he must not look. You know, we think this comes from President Kennedy. Ask not what your country could do for you, but what you could do for your country. It proceeds in the teachings of our sages way before. We always have to ask ourselves, what can I contribute? What can I make better? How could I plant another tree, make something grow, correct a problem, help a fellow who's struggling, improve in my spiritual connection to God, which in turn adds another beautiful flower to this world, which is God's garden. That's what Yud Shvat is about. That's what the splitting of the sea is about. That's what the Exodus is about. So that's my thoughts. That's my teachings. Like every single portion of the Torah, there's so many beautiful lessons. This week we learned about the manna from heaven. That's the foundation of trust and belief in God that He will provide. that we will have food to put on the table. There's many, many beautiful lessons. I encourage you to learn Torah. There's only so much that we could give in this few minutes that we share Torah over here. But share these words of Torah, please. It's to merit to you, it's merit to me, and then more importantly, it definitely gives a different, more positive, more holy perspective on things that are going on. So that's that. Have a fantastic, wonderful day. Please, as we started the class, participate in our matching gifts campaign so that we could further make this world a garden, and whatever that entails, in both between our relationship to God, relationship to a fellow human being. Have a fantastic and blessed, great week.